Hello and welcome to Guides.Global. My name is John Howell and I'm the editor, and with me today I have Başak Yıldız Orkun, who is a lawyer working here in Bodrum in Turkey. Başak, thank you for coming.
Hi, John.
In this segment we're going to deal with the legal issues surrounding working for others, what we loosely call employment. Do have to stress it's not aimed at people who are working for themselves, because that's a separate topic which we'll be covering in a separate video. So if you're working for yourself or you want to work for yourself and you're looking at this video, you're in the wrong place. Go to the other one. Okay, working for other people is always an extremely complex and very important topic, because it's a huge part of everybody's life. Mm-hmm. Let's start at the beginning. If you are a foreigner and you want to work in Turkey, work for another person, you will have to have a visa.
Correct.
Work permit. We've done a separate video about work permits, but in summary, they're not very difficult to obtain compared to most other countries.
Yeah.
Once you've got your work permit, will you then be entitled to all of the same protection and all of the same treatment that a Turkish person would be entitled to?
Yes, you will, because you will be subject to the Code of Employment of Turkey, and you will be covered by the Ministry of Employment.
So they can't put the foreigners in all the dirty, dangerous jobs?
No, no. Obviously no.
No, I see you smile, but it has been known in some countries.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're entitled to a range of protection. Mm-hmm. Let's just go through some of those things. First of all, you're entitled to an employment contract.
Yeah.
And what does that in contract in writing?
Yes, we would expect it to be in writing.
And what does it have to contain? What information does it have to give?
It is the term of the employment, obviously the salary, benefits, and what the description of your job. If there is any details about the employer that the employee has to know, that those all should be covered in the employment contract.
Okay, and you've talked about benefits. Is it common in Turkey that in addition to your salary, you should be entitled to other benefits such as housing or a car or that sort of thing?
If you're working for a big company, most of the international employees are getting the benefits, such as you mentioned, the housing or rental allowance, some car and health insurance. And
that will all be mentioned in your contract of employment?
It has to be, yeah.
So let's imagine now you've been working for this company for a certain period of time and you decide you want to leave. Mm-hmm. How much notice do you have to give them?
It depends on the period that you spent in that place of work. It's starting from the 2 weeks up to 8 weeks. So you can easily find it in the Code of Employment of Turkey. Yes. The periods are stated there. And you can give your notice, or you can pay the notice periods and then leave. By the way,
so you can pay.
If you didn't give the notice, you can make a payment to the employer, and then you can leave straight away.
So if my contract required me to give, say, 4 weeks notice, I could just pay them the equivalent of 4 weeks earnings and just leave?
Yeah, we call it like a notice pay.
Okay.
It is working the way around as well. The employer has to give the notice as like employee.
Well, I was just going to come to the employer. So taking the reverse situation, you've been working for an employer for a certain amount of time and the employer thinks you're a disaster and he wants you to go, then he can give you notice.
Yeah. The notice works like this. Actually, there are two termination possibilities. One of them we call it like immediate termination, which means if you are like immoral, or if there is some like a health problems, or
you steal from me,
or if you use drugs or come as a drunk, then you will be subject to immediate termination and you will get no payment in that case. But if you have a lack of performance, or if the employer thinks that you are no longer needed, then there will be a termination of by notice.
And if the issue, as is very often the case, is lack of performance, I believe there are certain things the employer has to do to tell you what's wrong, to give you the opportunity to improve, to monitor what you're doing and so on.
Exactly correct. Actually, there are some certain like a documentation needed, and as you mentioned, the opportunity has to be given to the employee, or some certain training has to be arranged for the employee. So lack of performance is one of the hardest, like a termination subject for an employer.
And what about if the employer just doesn't like you? He says, no, I don't get on with this person, I can't work with them.
Oh, it's not easy.
It's not easy to get rid.
Yeah.
So the employer just cannot say, you're entitled to 4 weeks notice under your contract, here you are, take 4 weeks pay and go.
What happens is actually, if the employer pays for it, obviously you cannot force any of the parties work together. But how it works in Turkey, if you work for a certain period of time, which is more than 6 months, and if your employer has 30 employees within the same place of work, and if they terminate your agreement without any justice reason, so in that case you can ask for re-employment of yourself. This is a different case, a different court case. And you can ask your job back because there is no like a termination reason. And if the court may decide, if the court decides that you are right and your employer just make you redundant because he didn't like you, terminate the agreement because he didn't like you, then you will be entitled to go back to the position. And if your employer still doesn't want you to work there, then he has to pay up to 12 months salary compensation.
The amount ordered by the court?
Yes.
Yes. So for people working in bigger organizations, there is a safety mechanism.
Exactly. We call it like a employee security system.
And this would be an application you would make to the employment court of the civil division of the
and there is a time limit for that. Yeah. Once you hear your termination, within 30 days you have to lodge your case.
But if you work for a smaller employee, as most people do, then you don't have that protection.
No, unfortunately we don't. And in that case, you will be entitled to get the notice pay.
Yes.
And if the employer is acting in a bad will, then you can ask for a further compensation. But I would say it is pretty difficult to prove. Yeah.
Yes. Just on an aside, really, what is the employment situation in Turkey at the moment? What is the percentage of people unemployed, roughly?
Oh, I think it was like 11% or something.
11%.
Yeah, the last time I checked. We have an unemployment issue.
Except there are lots of countries that would be very happy with 11% unemployment. So it is not. It's an issue, but not a disaster.
Yeah, not a disaster.
Yes.
Because we have factories and stuff.
Yes. Okay, so as an employee, you have certain rights. Right to time off if you're sick.
Yes.
You can't be dismissed for that.
No. If it is not exceeding some period of time, I mean, if you're calling sick for a year,
yes.
Then obviously the employer will have the right to terminate your agreement with a good reason.
And we've already looked in another session about your rights on retirement, but when you get to a certain age, you will have been contributing to the social security system and you will be entitled to a pension, not from the employer, but from the state. Yeah,
and you can keep continuing your job. The only difference will be the declaration. Your position will be declared as a retired employee.
Yes. Going back to whilst you're still working for the employer, what happens if you suffer an accident, if you're injured at work?
In that case, the employer must let the necessary Department of Government know, which is the like a Ministry of Employment. And if it's a work accident and if if it happened due to failure of the employer, then the employer should be covering all your damage. But obviously, if you are part of the Social Security is covering your damage on behalf of the employer.
Social Security would pay you your entitlement to benefit, your salary, compensation for any damage was caused to you, and then if it was the employer's fault, they would recover that from the employer.
Yes, correct.
Okay. So even if it wasn't the employer's fault, the person who is injured will still be entitled to the social security benefits?
Yeah, it's going to be still covered by the social security, but if it's the fault of the individual,
that's a different thing.
The social security then will go after the...
So they go back to work in the afternoon and they're drunk, then that's
it's a different story.
A different story altogether, of course. When it comes to employment, what do you look for, you as an employer, what do you as an employer look for when you are wanting to employ new people? What are the characteristics of the person that you're trying to find?
First, they must fit the position, the qualification, and also the experience has to be fitting the position that is open. The second thing, I would say they should be understanding their legal responsibilities and willing to sign any paperwork which is related to the employment, because some employees are reluctant to sign anything even they are in their benefit. So the characteristic would be basically, instead of good manners and moral behaviors, these are all basics, but the qualifications should be really meeting with the position.
And I guess, like in every country, when you interview someone, in your head you're asking yourself the question, would I like to work with this person?
Correct.
Sometimes they may be incredibly well qualified, but you just don't think you'd get on with them.
Yeah. And always you need to give a chance. Sometimes you are thinking that, okay, this person has to be working for me, but when they start, it is just a disappointment, so it could change.
So taking that a little bit further in the context of the foreign person who's coming to work in Turkey, what could a foreign person coming here do to impress you, to make it likely that you would want to employ them? What would you be looking for in an ideal foreign employee?
Actually, personally, I worked with an national a couple of years ago as a receptionist. It was a British receptionist. I think I would rather to go with someone who has at least some Turkish, because yes, I'm okay with speaking in English, but the people who are visiting our office may not be speaking English, obviously. So I would be going for someone who can at least speak some Turkish, and also quite and they have to know about our culture. So these are the facts. Yeah.
If we have got viewers who are thinking of coming to work in Turkey, really learning about the culture, learning a bit at least of the language, are the two top tips.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yes. Başak, thank you very much.
Thank you, John.
Well, we hope you found that useful. Başak has written a much longer guide to working for other people in Turkey. So we hope you find that interesting as well. She's also the co-author of our book, How Things Really Work in Turkey. And if you'd like to read that, that can be downloaded via our website, www.guides.global, for a very modest fee. If you've liked it, like us or follow this channel. If you do that or not, we'll see you again soon. Goodbye.